Today, we're diving into a medical emergency where the definition of danger was, for a long time, the real problem. I'm talking about status epilepticus. For years, the official rulebook was based on this one single number, a time limit that we now know was just dangerously wrong. So let's get into it and break down how a huge shift in thinking is literally saving brains and saving lives. So it really all comes down to this one simple but incredibly important question. When does a seizure actually become a medical emergency? I mean, when does that clock really start ticking? You'd think the answer would be straightforward, right? But for a long time, the official definition created this dangerous waiting period, putting the brain at serious risk. Yeah, for years, and I mean years, medical teams were caught in this terrible spot. They knew, they could see that a long seizure was a huge emergency, but the official rulebook, the guidelines, actually forced them to wait. It set the starting line for treatment way, way too late. It was a dangerous waiting game. And the whole thing, the entire protocol, the exact moment a seizure was supposed to be considered a top-level emergency, it all hinged on just one number, a single time limit. And as we now know, it was just way, way too long. And that number, it defined what was known for decades as the 30-minute rule. This wasn't some fringe idea. This was the official, internationally accepted definition of status epilepticus. So here's the bottom line of that old rule. For a seizure to be officially labeled status epilepticus, it had to keep going for more than 30 minutes. Or, it could be a series of seizures without the person recovering in between, but that 30-minute clock was the key. Only after hitting that mark was it officially considered a major top-tier emergency. Okay, so you might be asking, why 30 minutes? Where did that number even come from? Well, it wasn't just pulled out of thin air. It was based on some early animal studies that suggested 30 minutes was the point where you might start seeing irreversible brain damage. So it was meant to be a kind of scientific line in the sand. The problem was, what doctors were seeing with their actual human patients, that told a very, very different and much more urgent story. And right there, that's the absolute heart of the problem. Doctors on the front lines could see it plain as day. Waiting 30 minutes to officially call it an emergency meant that treatment was starting way too late. It created this built-in delay, and the longer that delay, the worse the outcome for the patient. It was a terrible risk. The evidence just became impossible to ignore. It was simple, really. The longer a seizure goes on, the worse the outcome. More risk of brain injury, more risk of death. It was a straight line. Something had to give. The medical world realized the problem wasn't just the treatment. The problem was the definition itself. A new approach wasn't just a good idea. It was absolutely necessary. And that's what led to a total game changer in 2015. The International League Against Epilepsy, the ILEE, stepped in and completely rewrote the rulebook. They threw out that single time limit and replaced it with something way more sophisticated. A concept that's kind of like a race against two different clocks. You can really see the massive shift here. Before 2015, everything was about that one number, 30 minutes. That was the rule, period. But then in 2015, the ILA task force came along and introduced this brand new two-part framework. And that's the system that guides how emergency responders handle these situations today. So what is this new framework? Well, it's built around two really critical time points. The ILA calls them time point 1, or T1 for short, and time point 2, or T2. Now, it's super important to think of these not just as minutes on a stopwatch. They're more like two totally different stages of an emergency, and each one tells you to do something different. And honestly, the best way to think about it is with this analogy. T1, that's your smoke alarm. It's that first, loud warning that something is wrong. It means the brain's own systems for stopping a seizure have failed. You have to act right now to prevent the fire. And T2? Well, T2 is the fire. That's the point where real, long-term damage is happening to the brain. The new definition basically screams at clinicians. Respond to the smoke alarm. Don't wait for the fire. But it gets even smarter, even more detailed. The new framework recognizes a really key fact. Not all seizures are the same. And if the seizures are different, it makes sense that the clocks, those T1 and T2 time points, should be different too. Timing is absolutely everything. And this is what makes the new system so powerful. Because different seizure types now have their own unique clocks. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach anymore. It gives doctors much, much clearer guidance. Let's take a look at what that actually means on the ground. Okay, so check this out. For a big, convulsive seizure, the tonic-clonic kind that most people think of, the smoke alarm, T1, goes off at just 5 minutes. That's the new signal to start treatment. And look at T2, the fire. It's at 30 minutes. Think about that. The entire old definition is now just the point of long-term risk. It's not the starting line anymore. Now, for focal seizure, where awareness is impaired, the T1 alarm is at 10 minutes. For an absent seizure, which might just look like someone is zoning out, it's 10 to 15 minutes. You can see how much more specific and proactive this is, right? So, what does this all boil down to? What's the real meaning of this change? Well, it's not just about swapping some numbers around. It's a complete, fundamental shift in philosophy. It moves everything from being reactive to being proactive. Instead of waiting for a 30-minute catastrophe, the goal is now to treat a 5-minute problem to stop it from ever becoming that catastrophe. It gives doctors clear, fast guidance. And the whole point, the ultimate goal, is to reduce brain injury and, well, save lives. In the end, this whole new way of thinking really drives home that old neurology saying, time is brain. Every second counts. So now we know time is brain. But the real question this whole story asks is, how does rethinking a simple definition completely reframe an emergency? It shows us that by changing the rules based on evidence, we can turn what was once a dangerous waiting game into a race that we are now so much better equipped to win.